only show that enables women to share their own secrets and insights to wellness, one story at a time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hélène Blanchette, and I'm the president of MyJane, and welcome to MyJane, My Story. Our mission is to unite and empower women through community, education, and exploration of cannabis solutions to address our biggest concerns like sleep, pain, stress, and even intimacy. There's so much overwhelming information out there. So we decided that we needed to come together and share stories by creating My Jane, My Story. And as you know, this is a place to talk about real life experiences so we can be better and help people live better. Every journey is unique, every path is special, and we're extremely grateful to have our guests that come every week to actually share their amazing stories. This is a non-judgmental space where every question is necessary to learn and shift our perspective on this plan. And today, our talk is with Gia Moron, president of Women Grow. She oversees the company's day-to-day operations, internal and external communications, education programming, and strategic partnership. She has over 25 years of experience in communications. And in 2012, Gia launched her firm, GMV Communications, a public relation brand strategy and business development consulting firm. Her client base ranges from small to mid-sized businesses, nonprofit organizations, entrepreneurs, authors, and celebrity clients, and obviously clients in the cannabis industry as well. Prior to launching her firm and working at Women Grow, she was a media relations officer in the corporate communication department for 15 years at the Goldman Sachs Group. And Gia currently resides in the hometown of Brooklyn, New York, with her daughter. And as we all know, New York legalized cannabis last week. So I'm sure we're going to slip that into our conversation today. Gia, welcome to My Gin, My Story. And I'm convinced that this 30 minutes will be filled with amazing information from you. So pleasure to meet you and to have you with us.
Pleasure to meet you, and thank you so much for having me. And I just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon.
Well, it's my pleasure too to have you. But Gia, when we see that you worked with large corporations, and as you know, I was at Xerox Corporation before, so I do understand probably how you stepped into our industry. But I mean, we have to ask that question. How did you get to the industry from Goldman Sachs to having your PR firm and now landing into the cannabis industry, and not just landing into the cannabis industry, but very, very involved in the cannabis industry. So you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Sure. So as you mentioned, and thank you for the lovely introduction. So as you mentioned, yeah, I worked on Wall Street, and then prior to that, I actually worked in corporate entertainment. And it's interesting because we never know where our paths will lead us. And I can tell you that, during my time between those companies, whether the Fremantle Corporation or Goldman Sachs, would I ever thought I would have launched my own company, because I had not considered that. But due to downsizing, and so I was laid off from Goldman Sachs in 2011, which was really on the heels of the financial crisis. So there was still some downturn that was happening in the market. And what's interesting is that, I left on good terms, and even, had been advised, look, if there are opportunities, we'd love to have you back. I don't think that was what I wanted to do. And I realized that I had an opportunity to launch my own company. And I thought, well, if not now, then when, right? And why not take the opportunity to try? And if it doesn't work out, then I then have the corporate experience and could go back to it. And so, the idea of launching GBM Communications was something that I thought, well, I'd like to actually do the work I was doing similar to Goldman, but in other industries, right? And looking at small businesses. And, when I think about small businesses, they're not necessarily mom and pop startups,
No.
but they're businesses that could be, anywhere from 10 to like 100, 200. employees, and these are companies that are quite successful and they're looking for PR, brand strategy, or business development consulting. And I wanted to take the skill sets that I had from my prior experience and really bring that to, let's say, mid to small size businesses that would welcome that expertise. And so they're launched GVM Communications on April 20th, 2012. And I think I told you that, I didn't understand the significance until I got into the cannabis industry, that I realized 420 meant something. I just thought, oh, I started my company. That's great. And so, I started the company in 2012, working in industries, again, financial services and other small businesses. But it was probably around 2013, 2014, that I started hearing more conversations around the marijuana industry. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. And that, financial news, which I continue to look at even after leaving Wall Street, that they were covering this topic. And I thought, well, this isn't normal. Why should I pay attention to this? Like, they're talking about this marijuana industry in Colorado and California. And so, if Wall Street didn't teach me anything, it always taught me about forecasts, to look at what's next. And that's really where the light turned on. And of course, I think like many people that approach the industry, you immediately think that you've got to grow or you need to own a retail space, which is what I thought. And then it was through some research, that's how I found Women Grow. And I thought, oh, wow, there are women in this space, because at the time, the coverage only showed men, and they only showed men ownership. They showed men working in the cultivations and retail. And I thought, where are the women who looks like me in this space? And that's when I found Women Grow. In, believe it or not, I was doing research for a client, pitching them for a cover story. And in the issue that I was looking at, there was a profile on the founder of Women Grow. And I read everything in that article and researched everything she mentioned. And that's what led me to Women Grow in New York.
Well, there's a lot of inspiring things in what you said there. The first one is that so many people right now during the pandemic has lost their job and had to reinvent themselves. And then, like when we look at you 7 years later, yeah, and even more than that, 8 years later now, where you had to reinvent yourself, you turn a sad moment into a great opportunity, and you would never go back, and you never looked back. It's certainly an inspiring story to begin with, and a lesson of courage and hope for those who are thinking exactly the same thing during that pandemic. And I like the fact that you said that it's about looking at the future, because let's face it, this industry is still not organized
No,
properly.
not at all.
And I don't know if you faced a little bit what I faced, and because you're in a you come from a large corporation and not necessarily from the sweat and tears of having made that industry what it is today and discovered the plant and in its compounds and the benefit of it. You're often going to be told that the industry belongs to those who have done some sweat and tears, and not necessarily those big corporate shots. But I don't know if you share with me this same belief, but I think that it's actually the mix between those who really form the industry and the corporate people that are coming in and respecting and engaging with those who are in the industry that will make it a strong industry that is credible, believable, and that will be really shaping it. Do you believe?
Absolutely. What's interesting, Helene, is that, that when I entered, the first thing that I recognized is that in the traditional corporate setting, when you go on job interviews, there's already systems in place. And there are policies, there are procedures, there's onboarding, all the things that we typically expect when we're hired at businesses. Well, you enter the cannabis industry, whether you're the leader of the company, or you're just someone who's at entry level, everyone's doing the same thing. Why? Because it's bootstrapped. So everyone's got to put the boots on, and it is required that you're going from the most basic levels to the most sophisticated levels just to get the company running. And you're learning about HR, you're learning about the legalities, and making sure that you're even doing your taxes properly. There's so much that I learned, but what I can appreciate is that the skill sets that I acquired along the way in my corporate career, right, in that professional setting, because this is still a profession and professional, but it helped me to begin to help others organize, because there are some people in this industry that don't come from traditional industry practices. And so coming in with just the thoughts of, hey, why don't we create code of ethics, which or code of conduct. There are companies that just didn't consider that. They just knew, we've got to get plants in the ground, we have to start growing, we've got to build this retail space. And so being able to say it's important to have an HR representative that will handle interviewing, and there should be a type of interview practice as we're bringing new talent into a company. And there should be some team building exercises and having open dialogue conversations. And it's interesting, I took those things for granted in corporate, only to realize, wow, those were so important and necessary. And look how we can begin to implement that here in this industry. And while some are resistant to it, there are others who are saying, wow, it's made a difference in my company because I didn't know. And training and development, to me, in this industry, is probably one of the most significant areas, right? Because there is so much room for growth. And while there are professionals that are transitioning into the industry, they're also able to help the teams grow, so that we'll begin to see the rise, right, of those who may have started on an entry level and begin to build to management, to even senior leadership within some of these companies.
Yeah, and you said something also, when I think that you come from the Wall Street world. I hear a lot of complaint on the market from women that say, the minute that the Wall Street people and the Silicon Valley funds and all those major funds that are coming in into the industry are pushing women aside or forgetting women into this. What do you think, knowing what you know about Wall Street, what do you think needs to happen for the VCs and the big fund managers to start looking at the women in this industry who have played a very important role, probably one of the most important role I've seen so far in the industry, to be looked at and respected and invested in?
It's a great question. And I'm so happy you asked, because I think the reason why I was intrigued by this industry was not only that I saw what was coming, I also saw an opportunity to create new normal practices. I've always been of the belief that you should not go into a new space looking for new results coming with old practices that didn't work in the last place. And what I mean by that is, when you begin to look at the technology industry, which has been a thriving industry for quite some time, but we continue to hear year over year that there aren't enough women leaders, right, in leadership role, or there aren't enough women that are being retained in the industry, and they can't figure out why. Well, they're probably creating the same cycle of patterns that probably need to be broken. And so what I find appealing to cannabis is that while it's starting out the same way, it's still early enough that we can change those practices that we've seen time and time again, and create new cycles, right?
Yeah.
Create something that we'd like to see
I
in the
agree.
marketplace. And I've always been of the belief that, you know, representation is key, and that you're absolutely right. There are women who have made huge sacrifices in order to help towards legalization, advocacy for patients, just even just building business. And so we have, like, why not now than any other time to create something that we'd like to see and see the reflections of our society really truly in this industry, so that we're not complaining about the lack of leadership in women or diversity overall across the board of all ethnicities. It's a great time. It's still early in this industry that we can
Mhm.
begin to create new normalcy. So as
Yeah.
what I'd like to say.
Yeah, to shape it the way we should, that it should be. I agree with you. You touched on the legalization and the role of women in the legalization. You have played an important role in the legalization of the cannabis in New York, which the bill was passed last week, I believe. And let's not forget that it's not because the bill passed last week that tomorrow morning, like, dispensaries will pop up everywhere. it takes a
No, there's
couple
still
of
so much
years.
work to do.
Oh
There's
my God,
still
there's
so much work to do.
that's right. So before we talk about the work that remains to be done, let's talk about the role that you've played during the forming of that bill. You want to talk to us a little bit more about what you've done in there?
Sure, I'm happy to. And what I'd like to say is it wasn't just me alone. Of course, like
No, of
it
course
was
not.
like
It
a
takes a village.
whole, I mean, when I say village, they're a village of people. And what I one of the things that I really loved about this industry, because again, I came from a very traditional, very conservative, you know, company, but just industry overall. The one thing that cannabis has taught me, one, it taught me about advocacy. I can't say that that was something that I was doing in the public setting, right? I think I've always advocated for fellow colleagues, right? For promotion or you know, just encouragement. But what the industry has taught me is that in order to be a business person, you actually need to be somewhat of an advocate, because we're still operating in a federally illegal industry.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
so, how do we get change is by coming together collectively to really create the change, which is legalization. And so, it's was the advocates that actually introduced me to how do we begin to advocate? What is it that we want to see? There's certain language, and I didn't realize the power that we all hold collectively to get those words on paper and to begin lobbying as collective teams of people going up to our state's capital and really, you know, having the conversations with our legislators to say, this is what the people want. We want to see legalization. We want to see decriminalization. We want to see opportunities for women and for minorities to operate at accessible entry points, right? Not points where, as you know, where it requires multi-million dollars for some of these vertical licenses. Whereas if the verticals were broken down, then there are more affordable entry points,
and
you
more
know, for
opportunities.
some, right, more opportunities for more people. And so I'm really proud to have been shoulder to shoulder with so many advocates, not just for 1 year, but for several years. I can honestly say that I really started taking it seriously probably in 2017, when I began to learn more about the importance of really getting behind those who are helping to craft the language, and then having those conversations with our legislators to say, hey, this is what the people want. Now you got to take it to the floor. Now you have to vote on it. But if we're voting these people to represent us, then we're expecting them to really carry our voices to their floors in terms of voting.
So
And
you
so
shaped the blueprint, the village that you and your village, you shaped the blueprint on which the bill was passed.
that, you know, what's interesting, and I'm happy you said that. That was one of the other reasons why I was attracted to this industry, because it was emerging, one of the things that I realized that I wanted to be a part of a change. I wanted to be part of the blueprint, one of the many bricklayers that are helping to build this industry. And I can't say that there are many existing industries where our, our mothers, grandmothers could really say that they were at the onset of something that's really, new. So being able to say we were part of the legalization in New York, that's incredible to me. I'm like, wow, we did this together.
Talk about the complexity of coming to a decision of passing it, because like people complain, oh, they're not fast enough, and how come it's not legalized in my state, and like that's usually what we hear, but there's so much complexity behind that. They must, like, some of the complexity or the things they have to think before they say let's make it into a legal product.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but back to your point earlier, us coming from the corporate setting, we come with that perspective. I think what I respect are the people who have been here and that we're able to then understand what they've done. And when we're able to see both sides, meaning coming from the perspective where we've now entered into a new industry and now can say we're a part of that perspective as well. We're seeing things from two sides. So we recognize that while a bill is passed, it doesn't necessarily go right into, like, legalities and regulations don't just happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But I think that is important so that we get it right,
Mm-hmm.
and or that we continue to work towards getting it right. And that's what I think is important, right?
I mean, they do have the opportunity to sort of copycat on certain things that I guess California is, but it must go beyond just the regulations, because then it goes to the cities, the local, the communities, and everybody
That's
has
exactly
to
it.
actually.
And every state is going to be different.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, right? Because it is becoming legal state over state, and not every state is a full adult use. So New York now has adult use and medical, where there are some states who would just have medical legalization. But we're not replicating exactly what the last state did. And I think that's what's unique about this, is that we're able to see, well, maybe this state, legalized, but there were some things within that bill we didn't necessarily agree, or that we want more of as advocates in this space. And I'm proud to say now that I'm an advocate. Before I was just a business person, but now we're business advocates, right? But that we're now understanding what other language needs to be included, because as business owners, we also deserve to have a voice that's a part of these bills that are being passed.
No, absolutely. And what happens to all these prisoners, all the people that were arrested, and spent, or are still in jail, or spent years and have now a record? Do state put that as the forefront of the things that they have to consider on what they're going to do, expunging their records, getting people out of jail? How does that happen after the bill is passed?
So, and that's another great question. So one of the things that New York has is expungement of records, right? And we think that that's critical. When you think about the time served for people who were doing the very thing that we're doing legally, right? But basically it's been built off of the work they were already doing, which I call the legacy market. And so when you think about the time that they've now served, they're now free people who are limited in their opportunities of getting jobs. Why?
Okay.
Because they have a record. So
Yeah.
being able to expunge that at least broadens what their potential opportunities are. So now we have people who are incarcerated still for these charges. And it is a matter of many of the law groups and advocacy groups to begin working with our judicial system and trying to get these people out, right? And so what I also love is that in this industry, we have expungement week programs that happen across the country at different times. And I think that is so critical for people to understand that while today you may have a record, tomorrow you could have a clean record, and either you choose to work in this industry or other industries, but that doesn't mean that your life is over. It could mean that your life is beginning anew, right?
That's really good. And I'm so glad to hear that, actually. So now, I knew that this 30 minutes was not going to be enough. Talk to us about Women Grow and what's your mission there and how we reach you.
Sure. Listen, I'm so thankful for the opportunity. So Women Grow is the largest professional network in the cannabis industry. We connect, educate, empower, and inspire the next generation of leaders. That's our mission. And so since inception, we've hosted something called signature networking events. And prior to COVID, we would come together every month for these networking events. And this is where women would find their partners, their service providers, their employees, or they'd come up with their new business idea. And so many of the leading women in the industry today started at a Women Grow meeting. And it's incredible to see what some of these women have gone on to do. Just recently, this morning, one of our former market leaders that used to hold the meeting, when I first met her in 2017, she came to our leadership summit with 1 bar of soap. Today, she has a whole skincare line. She has a medibles line. She has 10 group homes. She trains her group home attendees to, if they choose to work at her facilities. It's incredible to see what someone can grow into. And I've been able to take what we've seen in this industry as the gateway and turn it into Women Grow is my gateway into the industry, right? Connecting with amazing women like you. So yeah, that's who we are. Find us on @Women Grow across all social media channels.
That's it. And before you go, we always ask like a little speed interviews. So what is one thing that you're going to do for your wellness today?
Sit quietly.
Do you have a favorite quote that motivates you?
Start over. Tomorrow's a new day.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that one. Well, thank you very much. This was so interesting again, and we'll have you for sure again to talk about your work and your work into the shaping now the blueprint of the legalization of cannabis in New York. And we're very happy that you made time for us today. I'd like to remind everybody that My Jane, as you know, we support International Sanctuary and to empower women survivors of human trafficking. We include a piece of jewelry in our box that is handcrafted by survivors. And the sad story is that in 2020, the National Human Trafficking Hotline received more calls from California than any other state in the US. This is the mecca of human trafficking here for the United States, followed by Texas and Florida, respectively. To contact the Human Trafficking Hotline, call 1-888-373-7888 or text at 233733. You can visit myjane.com for a wealth of information that you can get in our marketplace. And you can listen to this podcast on Podbean and on My Jane, My Story. And we're happy to have you with us today, Gia, and we will certainly be behind you in everything you do. So please find us also on Instagram at MyJaneSocial. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to My Jane, My Story. If you want to learn more, you can join the My Jane community at myjane.com. Get instant access to our Facebook group, Facebook community, educational resources, and updates on My Jane products and special events. And for personal attention right now, you can also pick up the phone and call 833-MY-JANE2. That's MYJANE2. And speak to your own wellness concierge, because it's time to own your wellness. Be well.